Okay, I'm going to talk about my absolute favorite game. And I think, and I hope a couple of people are here that play poker as well. If not, don't worry, I'm going to go through a couple of the basics just to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to the decision-making part of it. Poker is something that taught me a lot in life, which sounds really weird when you say it, because it's just a card game, right? But I learned confidence. Probably wouldn't stand here, maybe without poker, because sitting at a poker table with like 8 men that stare at you in the whole room in a poker tournament with only 5% women, it's quite challenging, you know, and it's nice to go through it and learn it and grow. So one of the aspects I thought is interesting to share with you is decision making. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's see if it works. No? No. Guys, do you know? Oh, so I have to go all the way here. Okay, so who am I? My name is Christin. I'm from Germany. My background is in marketing, innovation, and content creation. And I played poker for 14 years, but not professionally, just as a hobby. But I work in the poker industry for 13 years. And a lot of that was marketing, and now it's actually I'm having my own business doing content creation. It's a massive industry. A lot of people are not aware, just thinking it's just a card game. It's not. Big industry behind it. I do document my whole life, basically the nomad life in the poker world on my YouTube channel, Nice and Sunny. If you want to check that out. There's a lot of Vegas stuff happening later this year, so it will be fun. And I always wear black, not just because I was in a goth band once, but also because it's easy, right? I don't have to think about what to combine it with. You can combine black with everything, so taking some decisions away and make it easy. Okay, what is poker? I'm expecting, again, like most of you to actually have heard of poker at least at some point. Who has played poker before? Wow, okay. I think that's roughly half. Okay, so I'm going to still go a little bit into the details of the rules of the game, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. But don't worry, it's not going to be too... So those that know poker, it's not going to be too much talk and maybe too boring, and those that don't know it, not too much into detail. So yeah, a lot of people think poker is a card game. It is played with cards, but it's actually not a card game. There's a lot more to it, and I will keep banging on about that because it's important to me that poker is something very special. It is a skill game with an element of chance, right? So the better you get at the game, the more you learn it, the more you can reduce the skill, the luck factor, and the more it becomes actually a skill game. So the most important things you have to be a good poker player is strategic thinking, so strategy is important, psychology, and patience. So once again, we already mentioned it, it's a game of incomplete information. If you play chess, let's say, you have all the information right there, it's right in front of you. If you play poker, you don't, so you have to make decisions based on incomplete information. That is a big difference, and that's why it's so exciting, and I'm going to go a bit more into the details. Okay, so just a very quick summary of how poker works. This is Texas Hold'em, so you get dealt 2 cards to yourself. They're hidden. As you can see, I can't see the cards of my opponents there. You combine then your own cards with the cards that are being dealt on the table. So it's always 5 cards make a poker hand. So can anybody tell me what my hand is right now?
Flush?
Straight. Exactly. So you have the 9, 10, Jack, Queen, King. So it's like always 5 cards, and in this case, it's a straight. But again, this is not relevant for what we're talking about. It's just about the decision-making points for this. So the very first moment when you get your cards dealt at the poker table, you have to decide, am I going to play this hand? And that already you can take into the real life. You know, like we had Dean, yesterday Dean was speaking, I think, right? And he said, say yes to everything. And as much as I agree with that, like with poker, you should not do that necessarily. So have a think about which cards you want to play, which hands you want to play, because you can get in a lot of trouble playing the wrong kinds of hands. So that's the first decision to make. And if you decide I want to play this hand, how do you want to play it? Aggressively? Do you want to raise? Re-raise? How much do you want to raise? So there's a lot of decisions in this very first moment. Then, which might not be obvious for a lot of people, the 5 cards don't come at the same time. So the first 3 cards are dealt, it's called the flop, and then you have to make decisions again. So once the flop is dealt, you combine your cards and you start thinking, okay, what's my hand now? How valuable is it now? What are my opponents doing? How many opponents do I have? How many chips do they have? So there's a lot of stuff going into that first one or that second one. And the same is happening after the 4th card and the 5th. So we have in total 4 moments that we have to make very intricate decisions about how we play this hand. Obviously, a lot of people think poker is gambling. And yes, if you would, right in the beginning, put all your chips in the middle and see what happens, that's gambling. You know, there's no skill involved in that. But as you could see, having 4 different points of really important decision making makes this a whole different game, and it's not gambling. Okay, does anybody know this guy? Yes. Okay. So this is Phil Ivey. He is the GOAT, the greatest of all time by many poker players. He has a lot of fans, and he has one of the most famous, if not the most famous, poker face. In this instant, he doesn't even have cards in front of his hand, but like the way he looks is a complete blank face, and he's very known for that, having the mouth slightly open, so his mouth doesn't give any information away. Some players wear like sunglasses, so that their eyes don't give any information away. But this is like his typical face, so you always see him. And if he has cards and he looks like that, you know he's calculating, he's processing, he's trying to get all the information to make the next decision, right? So that's a proper poker face. Other people, when they make decisions at the poker table, look different. So yeah, that's just a very embarrassing one, but... Okay, so 3 points I wanted to talk to you about that I learned through poker when it comes to decision making. One is, it depends. So if one poker player tells another a hand, what would you do with kings? The other person would say, it depends. You know, how many chips did you have? How many other players were in the hand? What was the action before? How many chips did they have? You know, there's so much stuff. You can't just answer that with, oh, you play kings this way every time. Doesn't work. And again, important in life, ask that question. It depends. What exactly was the situation? Sorry about this. Okay, so we already established poker and life are games of incomplete information. So it always depends if you want to make a decision. It's not easy. It's never easy. You know, there's always information you have to gather to make the right decision. So before you make that important decision, always figure out, do I have all the information I can possibly get at this point? Or is there maybe more to come in the future? And then you will decide later, it will be the second point, to maybe make a decision on when you want to make the decision. At this point, it's just important to know, do I have all the information to make the decision? And the other thing, do I have too much information? Because that can get dangerous, and that's why it's also important to put a time cap on a decision, because you can just get infinite pieces of information, and you end up with analysis paralysis. You probably have heard about that. So I have one example. I was dating a guy in the States, and we went to a supermarket, and you know American supermarkets, or probably have a rough idea how they look like. They're massive, right? And there's like all this choice and all this stuff. So he says, hey, I'm gonna go get some cereals. Can you grab some bread? And I probably should have said, it depends. Do you have some more information for me? And well, he didn't give me any more information, so I was going to the bread aisle, and it looked like this. So I started being a good German. I started like reading everything. We're like, okay, I get all the information, do this right, and I just couldn't get to a conclusion, because we only started dating. I don't know what bread he likes, so it ended up like he came back, and I stood frozen in front of this this wall of bread, which that's toast. For German, that's toast, right? That's not bread. Anyway. So he came back, and what he did was he just looked at me, just grabbed one, threw it in the shopping cart, and walked off. Okay. So that was a big learning for me, not to get frozen by these kind of decisions. Doesn't mean it's not happening anymore. Okay, second point. Second of the three. I'm trying to speed up. Calling the clock. I think this is a very specific poker term. I don't think this exists in other areas. So this is quite interesting, because if you play online poker, you have a little timer for your decision, right? It's like, I think it's a minute that you have time. But when that minute is up, your hand is folded. That's it, you know? Sometimes it's checked, but whatever. If you play live poker with real people, there's no clock. In some tournaments there is, but mainly there's no clock. So if a person now sits there trying to make a decision with all these data points coming in constantly, they could take hours in theory, you know, but then everybody is bored and the casino is not making enough money. So at some point somebody will want to call the clock or call time. And that means that anybody at the table can call the clock, and somebody from the casino comes over and says, "Sir, you only have 1 minute now to make a decision. If you don't make it by then, your hand is dead." So the hand gets folded, and that's it. So this is a very interesting thing. So you're being forced to make a decision, right? And in poker, some people can't handle this pressure when they have very, very close decisions, like 50-50 decisions. They might call the clock on themselves. So that actually somebody comes, you have 1 minute, and then you're like, okay, I need this pressure to make this decision. It's important. Really, well, there's some that flip a coin. That happens as well. And there's some people that are really the high-end, really good poker players. They actually try and balance and randomize their decision, which humans aren't really capable of by nature, to just randomize what you're doing, but they use their watches. So once they're faced with a decision, they look at where the dial is. Is it in the first half or the second half? And they base their decisions on that. And they just know, okay, I do this now. And if I have this situation 100 times, I balance. Okay, so basically, first we had, make sure you have all the information that you can possibly have to make a right decision at this given moment, but then also set a time limit, set a restraint. There could be different restraints, but let's say time is probably the easiest. And just say, this is the point when I want to make this decision. Like, what I sometimes do is I actually put a time in my calendar and say, in this half hour or hour, I want to think about this problem and find a decision. So I make this the moment. Sometimes, we're all travelers, you want to make sure that you book that flight before it gets super expensive, for example. So you have a time restraint right there. So find a time restraint. And yeah, so otherwise you could come up with too much information. And I actually have an example here where I was sitting in the quiet space in the garden a couple weeks ago. And there was somebody on the phone talking to a friend who wasn't a nomad and explained how great this life is and how awesome it is. But he was facing this issue that now that everything was opening up again, he didn't know where to go next. Yeah, it was fascinating. So he said every morning he wakes up and goes like, I don't know what to do next. I mean, in Bansko it's nice, but where do I go next, you know? And all of a sudden, it's weird that we have too much choice. And again, it will end up, you know, I mean, Bansko is nice, but then you might end up with analysis paralysis and you just stay where you are, right? Question is, do you want it? Fine, then that's good. Right, the luck factor. We just talked earlier about uncertainty. That was the first talk this morning, so it's quite interesting. The one thing is, obviously, the luck factor. Again, it's fairly small the better you get in poker, but you have to keep in mind that luck is always a factor, always, in life and, well, life, in anything in life, right? So we have to learn to be okay with it, and this is something, again, where poker players need to get good at accepting this. So again, this morning we learned that uncertainty is basically causing humans to, like, it's fear. It's basically a feeling of fear, not knowing what's happening next. So we want to avoid it, but if we start accepting this and just be okay with it, that there are certain things we can't control, like a global pandemic. You know, you can plan everything perfectly, and then shit hits the fan and that's it. So you never know, and we have to learn to be okay with it. And this is also something I've learned through poker, to just not take it too seriously. I make the decision with the information I have, at my best knowledge, but then things can still go differently. Some of you are probably following Gary Vee. He also says this quite a bit. He says we can't see the future, right? Make the decision. Just make the decision. Think about what you want to do, because it can all go in any direction. You never know. You know, you could say, I'm glad I wasn't in that country when the tornado hit, but maybe you would have been fine and you would have been found the love of your life. You know, you don't know. So it's really important to really figure out. Luck is a factor, it's always there. Uncertainty is a factor, it's always there, and be okay with it. So I'll try and summarize. I'm really speeding. Right, so to summarize, basically, be sure you have all the information that you possibly need. So at the poker table and in life, it's important to just pause for a second, step back, just go, okay, let me see. Is that person looking nervous? Should I really raise here? Do they look happy about their cards? I don't know. And in life, the same thing. Step back for a second, breathe, give it time to think about it, give a time limit to when to make that decision, and then decide. And I'm gonna, before we have some questions, I'm gonna finish with a quote of an unknown person. Be decisive, right or wrong. The roads are paved with flat squirrels that couldn't make a decision. Thank you. About poker, decision making. Or squirrels. You want
to question about this information. How can I make sure that I have the most information available? Because I have been in many situations that later on I realized I didn't know that I didn't know.
Yeah, well, that's part of the uncertainty, right? It's like at that moment, just try and make sure you have everything you need and make the decision. And then you can always, at some poker, it's the same thing. The next card comes, so you have more information, and then you reevaluate where you're at. It's very rare that decisions that we make are completely final.
Okay.
So there's always some ways to reevaluate and then. Any other questions?
What about aims? So in life we have different aims, family, probably study, and is it in poker the only aim to win, or isn't it?
It's more like for most people that are playing professionally, it's more about solving puzzles. It's more, yeah. So it's like, of course, if you're a beginner player, you probably go, oh, I'm going to win millions with poker. It's rarely how it goes. Like the really good players love the solving the issue and actually looking at the problem and trying to solve it as good as possible. Any other questions?
Are you really that good in your own life, except for poker, in making decisions? Look at you, I mean, you're wearing black because you don't want to make additional decisions about your goals. So how do you find yourself in front of menu, in front of life in general, a little bit nitty-gritties?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. This wasn't a conscious decision to start just wearing black. It just happened, and now it's easy, and it's easy for traveling to just have black stuff. But the thing that I wanted to share is the learnings I had through poker. It doesn't mean I'm perfect at it. It just means these are the things that improved my own life, especially this moment of really, if somebody says to me, do you want to go for dinner like on Friday? I said, depends. Like, you know, what else is there on offer? What are the options? You know, so I learned to just step back a second before I make a decision. And that's something I've definitely learned through poker. Yeah.
I realize this isn't the focus of your talk, but do you have any great quotes on how to, grief, loss, regret when we find ourselves being the flat squirrel in the room?
I didn't catch the second.
Do you have anything to share on the grief and loss and regret of decisions?
Oh, yeah, well, that's, first I wanted to put it in because there's actually, again, I put it to the poker context, because quite often, like if you fold a hand, you won't see the next cards that are going to be dealt. It's actually like really in poker, like if you make the decision on the flop to say, I don't want to play this hand anymore, you will not see what would have happened on the turn in the river. So it drives poker players crazy, you know. So, but again, sorry.
In life.
Exactly, and it is very uncomfortable. But that's why I said about the uncertainty. You have to be okay with it. You have to just be okay with it going some direction that you would have loved or wouldn't have loved. It's just you have to learn to be okay with it. And that was actually, I'm not sure if we get all these things. The very first talk today was about this topic, to learn to be okay with uncertainty. If you can get your hand on that, I think that would be very helpful for this question. All right. Right, I think that's it. Thank you very much.